All right, everybody, welcome to our weekly webinar. Today we're going to be talking about some topics that you need to know specific to where to put a practice and locations that have promise, and even some places that you really ought to avoid. There are, in fact, a growing number of places, particularly close to urban areas, that I'm really saying, wave it off, guys, don't land here. One of the reasons, of course, is cost, and we're going to talk about why some of the properties are getting extremely expensive and why those areas aren't as fruitful as they used to be. If we go back into my history, and I really started doing this about 35, almost 40 years ago.
Good night.
Thank you, Mike. You know, your mic is live, okay?
Sorry, I thought that was my bad.
Well, things have changed a lot. And in that change, we have to not only say what's changed, but why has it changed? So today we're going to be introducing the topic. In fact, let me do my little switch or share screen. So don't go away. Ignore that man behind the curtain.
I was going to say, where would we go, Scott?
Where indeed? Okay, come on now. Slideshow.
There we go. All right.
Now, we're going to be talking about gentrification and practice locations. Now, the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is one of the things that you're hearing in the public debate right now is how bad gentrification is on America. What people want to do is to force cities and counties, but more especially city governments, to do low income locations, and that includes for businesses and residents. And it's supposed to be the hot place to go, because if you go to a place like that and they're taking all those people off the streets, a lot of healthcare professionals are thinking, this is perfect because all those people need my care. Now, you recognize, of course, that people who are poor don't have much money to pay, so they're depending on public dole, if you will. The bad news is cities and states are often extremely cheap in what they're affording. So when people are cheap, it means how are they saving money for the counties and the cities? Well, they're taking it out of your pocket. Let me back up. Let's talk about what gentrification is, because a lot of people talk about it, not a lot of people know what it means. It's the process of changing the demographic character of an area through the increase of rich residents and businesses. Now, it's not just residents, it's also businesses, and those businesses that cater to rich people. So gentrification just basically means that everybody's going to earn a little bit more money. Now you may say, well, hey, that doesn't sound so bad, except this is the heart of the public debate about people living on the street. Now, having been in Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay Area not too long ago, and of course having been to Seattle like a million times, I can tell you the number of people living on the streets is going up, and the question is, why? The number one reason given is because there is no affordable housing. Now, everybody should know that gentrification means everything is going to become more expensive. My question right now to start is gentrification good for practices? In short, if you're going to have a dermatology practice, a dental practice, or any kind of healthcare practice, is it good to be in a place that has gentrification going on? I'll answer that as we go along. Well, yeah, it's a good thing. Absolutely. You should know that a gentrified area is going to be more expensive. It's going to be expensive in two ways. More expensive in your lease, and it's going to be more expensive in employment. Generally because your staff isn't going to be able to live as close to an office because the prices are higher. But your job as a healthcare professional is not so much to find a place that's great for your staff, it's to find a place that has a lot of people who are willing to pay your fees. Now, why does it help practices to be in an area that has gentrification? Well, this may sound like a no duh, but crime goes down. Crime goes down a lot whenever an area gets more people who are have more money. It goes down because, frankly, policemen get calls all the time from people who are wealthy business owners and residents saying, get somebody down here. And when they can't, they'll often hire a private security service to get the people off the street or by their businesses who are going to be disruptive. And that's happening increasingly. Ultimately, we've also found a correlation between production and collection rates increasing whenever there's an area of gentrification. People don't mind paying a little bit more if they think what they're about the affluent is they're very benefit conscious. The patient count, the new patient count, almost always goes up because even people living on the outside of this newly gentrified area feel comfortable in going to the gentrified area because of the crime and because of the perceived value of being in those locations. Also, the value of the lease, not the price, but the value of the lease, as well as the improvements that you put in the property, tend to go up. Now, if you put a little paint, a little wallpaper up, a little new carpet, whatever, believe it or not, it increases the value of that lease because the people coming in are usually expecting something a little better, and not surprisingly, they're willing to pay a little more for it. There's also a fact that people tend to ignore, and that is when people with money, particularly businesses, move into an area, public investment increases. For some weird reason, people pay more attention to garbage, about pavement, about parking availability. That is a natural habit of what happens whenever gentrification occurs. Now what are the downsides of gentrification? There are some. The poor can't afford their old neighborhoods. Now that's one of the things that people who are social justice warriors are saying. You can't increase how much housing costs because the old neighborhood's going to collapse or change. And one of the examples that I'm going to give right off is Harlem. Now Harlem, for a short time, was a really upscale, nice part of New York and Manhattan. Then it went really, really, really downhill and became kind of an ethnic place. There became Black Harlem and Spanish Harlem, and it wasn't a particularly good place to live. But all of a sudden, the rich said, you know what? I want to go to Harlem. We can afford to develop that area. And all of a sudden, people couldn't afford to live in Harlem as they once did. Remember, former President Bill Clinton set up his post-president office in Harlem. Race and ethnic groups can shift, but not always. Now, what that means is sometimes socioeconomics will be much more important than race and ethnicity. And that is it's gonna matter in that sometimes traditional groups don't stay in the same area. Chinatown in San Francisco is going through something similar. If you look at West Covina and Anaheim in greater Los Angeles, a lot of the traditional Asian communities are being displaced. However, a lot of the more affluent people who are Asian are saying, we like the change. But it is true that there's less affordable housing available, and that is a fact of life of gentrification. I'll mention more about that in a minute. The area becomes less interesting. Now, when I say that, an ethnic character adds something to the town. If we look at the North Shore in San Francisco, there used to be a big Italian place, and there are lots of Italian restaurants. Very few of them right now. It used to be Fisherman's Wharf, really was a wharf, and there were lots of fish places. Well, that kind of went down too, and it became more touristy. It is less interesting because it is more homogeneous, a little more bland, if you will. Gentrified areas become more expensive, and that is absolutely, by definition, what happens. And practices can actually have more competition. It just means in a gentrified area, there are positive incentives to move there, and so practices are going to find other people who move there. But because of the increased cost of living, it is also a truth that they can make more money because the compensation rates tend to go up and you can raise your fees. Now, here's the issue. Where are the poor going to go if all of a sudden an area becomes gentrified? You're going to think I'm the most heartless son of a gun that's ever lived. Guys, we're in a podcast about professional practices. We're not here as social workers. So I'm not going to say I don't care. I'm just going to say it's not really the issue of this podcast to talk about it. But generally speaking, they will tend to move to other poor neighborhoods. Now that often will be a bit of a culture shock because the race and ethnicity that they previously came from may be a little different than what they're used to. living on the street and public space has become kind of an excuse why there are these tent cities. Well, nobody else can afford to go there. But here's kind of an irony. A lot of people keep looking to the cities and the counties as being the source of public living and, to have some place to go. I'm not sure that that's really their job. There are always going to be places to go, I will tell you. And frankly, living under a bridge may be the idea for some people, but it's not as big an idea for most people as you might think. Typically, they will go back to other poor neighborhoods. And there are some places that are going to be less expensive than these urban areas. And frankly, San Francisco and Los Angeles are two good examples. So is Seattle, where there are very, very expensive places, even very tiny apartments that are subsidized are being fought over because, well, frankly, there's not enough of it. Cities are being more generous in some places than in other areas. There's an irony to this, though, that sometimes the places that are most generous are going to wind up attracting the least desirable element. And therefore, gentrification is a way to kind of sweep out the city and bring in people who are going to pay higher taxes and make services available to local residents and businesses. All right, now here's something that's going to be a bit of a strain for some people's brains. Race and ethnicity always defined the nature of a neighborhood. Now, not so much. It's socioeconomics. How much money people earn that is affecting who lives there. And what I'm really saying is race and ethnicities are mixing much more than they ever have before. In fact, if you have a neighbor who's Black, do you care? If you have a Hispanic or a white neighbor, do you care if they don't live a lifestyle that's interfering with your life? If they have the same education, if they have the same age or lifestyle divisions, you really don't care because, frankly, race and ethnicity is becoming vastly, diluted, if you will. Now, some people say that's kind of Martin Luther King's dream, to be judged by your character, not by the color of your skin. Some people are offended, however, by that and want to create neighborhoods that are actually going backward in the distribution of race and ethnicity. There's also a truth that socioeconomics is becoming more stratified than it's ever been. So in other words, it really does make a difference where you put your practice and where you live, because you want people to be in the same quintile, 1/5 of the population, that is the same. And that will make you most comfortable with having your practice and serving that population. People who aspire to something a little bit better will tend to go to the places that are gentrified because even if they're not in that socioeconomic group, they feel more comfortable there. Now, here's a few truths about gentrification, and I'm trying to move along here, Mike. Give me a minute. You are going to pay more in a gentrified area for your lease. Your advertising may be more expensive too, but the residents and businesses need somewhere to go if they want to serve the poor. This is not a new phenomenon. There are some practices that really do well in the lower two quintiles of socioeconomics. And generally speaking, it's not hard to find professional space in those circumstances, but they may have to move too if that's their business plan. Those people who want to serve the upper 2 or 3 quintiles will probably move that as well. Just remember, people are a moving target, as I'll state in just a second. It's not caused by government or business cabals. It's really caused because an area is developed, investments are made, and people kind of go, that's where I want to go. It's where new employers are, especially in a high-tech area. That's where people want to go. So gentrification is a natural occurring thing. It is a market condition, in other words, and we're going to see it happen. And please do not forget, it's not one city or one area in the country that's doing it. Every city in the United States is going through some form of gentrification. It may not happen exactly the same way, but it happens. And this is one of the things that at Dr. Demographics, we are tracking closely. Now, let me just kind of make sure you understand. If you want to know where gentrification is occurring and where you want to go, talk to us. If you have one of those computer model things that are done by some of our competitors, they're very sweet and the graphs are so pretty, but they don't know what they're talking about because they're going by data tables that are like ham-fisted, kind of blunt. It's not what you want to do. It may make a difference of 2 or 3 miles that will make all the difference in the world of where to go. That's why you use Dr. Demographics to help figure out what the most viable, best place you can go will be. Now, I'm recommending this week the Miracle Max 49 discount. It's only available for just a few people. We don't tell everybody this. But if you enter Miracle Max 49 in our webpage when you're ordering a report, you get $49 off. It won't last forever, but it is something that we're doing at least for another couple of weeks. So, Mike, are you ready? Mike, I can't hear you. Mike, I can't hear you at all. Are you muted? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Did you just say a swear word, Mike?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you.
Okay. All right. I had some kind of a glitch with my microphone. I don't know why. Okay. All right. Well, now that we've wasted a few minutes on that little exchange, let me move this microphone that obviously no longer works.
Who's the old man now? Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Who's got the tech problems now?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see if I can share my screen with a little bit more grace than my elderly companion. Scott, can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. You've gone away. I'm just going to assume that you can. So here's the deal. We have a lot of practices, a lot of doctors that obviously call us at Dr. Demographics, and they have an area that they would like us to study for them. And our goal, obviously, is to put all of our force and energy into that area, do all the studies, and then tell them the truth about that area. And sometimes it's great news, sometimes it's not so good news. And so sometimes I've had to lend my broad shoulders to some teary eyes when they realize that the area that they have placed their hopes and dreams on does not look good demographically for a practice. Now, what I do is I try to rattle them out of that just for a second, because I try to let them know that there are factors that may equal a huge amount of success in areas that don't necessarily look that great on paper, don't look that great demographically, but because of some X factors that they may have unique to them, they can still be very, very successful in otherwise unsuccessful areas. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how, if you are a doctor who has your heart set on an area and you want to practice there, but all the numbers are coming back is not great, but you're still set on it, how you can still be successful. Or I also want to talk to doctors who have found themselves in this cycle, like what Scott was just talking about. And whether you're on the upside of that cycle or the downside of that cycle, you may have found over the last 5 or 10 years that your neighborhood has changed dramatically. And what once was a very successful area is now looking a little run down, and maybe the growth has stopped. Maybe the city has put one of these fantastic business ordinances in place where it has chased out a lot of businesses. Maybe you were in an area that was very blue collar, and maybe a big plant shut down or something like that, and the unemployment rate has gone up. What I want you to do if you were in one of those areas is A, not panic, and B, really look at the situation with your marketer hat on and decide whether this is going to be a good stay for you. Because understand, it might be the right choice for you to close down and move. It very well could be that. And hopefully you're getting advice from people like Dr. Demographics to give you the guidance on that. But it also may not be a good long-term investment for you to leave because of what you built. And so whether you're in one of those situations, that's what I want to talk about today in the next 10 minutes or so. So first thing I always tell people is the fundamentals don't change. And this is true even when cavemen were writing on walls talking about where the next deer herd was. Marketing has always been marketing. And yes, the vehicles changed. Where we once advertised in Yellow Pages or on radio or television, some of these places, now we advertise on the internet, through Facebook ads, through Google ads. Who knows what it's going to be next year or 5 years from now. But the vehicles are going to continue to change, but that does not change the fundamental things that we know about marketing a business. That those things never change. And what I have found is that most businesses, as is true with many basketball players that don't succeed in the long term, is they focus on the flashy and they do not focus on the fundamental points of a successful marketing or successful dental or professional practice, veterinary, optometry, doesn't matter. They don't focus on those fundamentals. So let me just kind of dig into those real quick. So that first fundamental I want to talk about is establishing your unique selling position. Now understand, this is something I've talked about many, many times. As a matter of fact, I probably bring up that phrase every single week when we do this on Tuesdays, because it's just that important. And I would say that it's probably the number one thing that almost every doctor struggles with when I first talk to them, especially in a marketing evaluation format. They do not have their definition focused. They do not know what unique service or offering that they can provide to their community. They do not have the answer of what it is that they can do that nobody else can do. Now, again, that litmus test, like I've shared so many times, is a unique selling position is either A, something that you can do that nobody else can do, which admittedly is very difficult in professional practice because chances are your competition is doing all the same things, procedural, clinical things that you're doing, or B, it's something that you're willing to do that not everybody else is willing to do. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but that is really in its essence what a unique selling position is, and then how you are going to package that USP and deliver it to your potential target. Now, that kind of brings us to the next point, which is, do you even know who your target is? If you're in an area and you do not have a defined target of exactly who it is that you're going after to deliver your message to, then you are doing the shotgun marketing approach, and hope is your best friend because you're hoping that that marketing works. It's not based on any science. This is, again, one of those fundamentals that is so often neglected by professional practice owners, that they do not have their target. When I ask them about it, they'd say, oh, we'll treat everybody. And that my answer to that always is, well, of course you'll treat everybody, but who are you targeting? Who is it in your area that is the perfect patient or the perfect client for your practice? If you don't know that, and if you can't write that simply, then you need to go back to the fundamentals and work that into your unique selling position and knowing your target. The third thing, so doggone important for especially doctors, is to be accessible. You have to be accessible to your community. They have to feel like that you are their friend, that you are their advocate, that you are the person that's going to be caring for their future, either themselves or Fido the pet or their eyes or whatever. They have to believe that about you. And the way that you do that is by being accessible, either by appearing accessible or actually investing in the time to be invested into that area. Again, a lot of owners that are practicing in bigger cities and they go to smaller areas and open up a quick satellite practice, this is where they struggle because the community knows that they're not there, that they don't live there, that they don't have that investment in that neighborhood. And so they do not appear very accessible. And you, as a practice owner, can have that be a fundamental and make that a huge part of your message that you put out to the community. Now, the last fundamental, and there are many more, but the last one that I want to talk about today is follow-up. I don't know why it is. I don't know why it is, but so many doctors struggle with follow-up. This is basic. This is elementary school marketing 101 that you have to follow up. And if you don't have a good follow-up procedure from everybody who you actually treat within your office, all the way down to the people who are just thinking about coming into your office, if you don't have some kind of procedure, some kind of campaign, some kind of system, or as I like to talk about it, a funnel that brings that person down to where they're going to end up in your chair. If you don't have that in place, you're missing out on a huge fundamental. And I would say if we're talking about basketball, it's as fundamental as dribbling. It's one of the most important things that you as a doctor can do. And I would say that conservatively, 60% of doctors really struggle with follow-up. They just don't have the procedures in place. It's too time-consuming, or they think it is, and so they just absolutely neglect it. You can make a huge impact in your community, and your trust score with that community will increase dramatically. So this is what I want you to be thinking about. And again, this kind of goes with the fundamental, is you have to execute your plan every single day without fail. We see this so often, especially with social media. You'll see a doctor that will go to a conference or training, and they'll get all excited about Facebook, and they'll post really neat stuff, and every day or maybe a couple times a day. Then that'll trail off after about a week. The next week, maybe there's just a post or two. Within 30 days, typically that doctor is not executing their social media plan. Now, me as a marketer, that's very frustrating, because I know how to make social media convert into actual patients or clients for the practices that we work with. But they have to execute, and they have to execute consistently. I often tell doctors, once I get them excited about one type of a campaign or another, that if they're not going to be consistent, then it really is a giant waste of time and money, and they really ought to not do it, because they will actually decrease the trust score with their audience if they're not consistent. Consistency is one of the most important points. So when you get up in the morning, you put on your tie, you're on your way to the office, you make sure that you have a plan in place and you are executing it perfectly every single day. And if you're having trouble executing it because you don't have enough staff, you don't have enough time, then you need to evaluate the strategy, not give up on the plan. Now, since we're talking in this way, I want to kind of make another comparison, and that is to the true battlefield. And I use this comparison a lot, frankly, when I talk to doctors, because they need to understand that when they go into a market, especially a market that is not growing, that is not bringing in new businesses, that is not having a lot of new people move there, this becomes even more true. You have to be protecting what you have and the time that you're spending just to the minute, because if you don't, your competition is going to be taking your patients away from you. And if you don't believe that, you just lay off the gas for a little bit, and you will find that your patient numbers will start to dwindle, because somebody is out marketing you, somebody is out executing you, somebody is on the battlefield winning the war against your practice. And as nice as they seem at the association meetings, they want nothing more than put you out of business. Now, I know that sounds a little harsh, but that is the truth. You have to view this, especially your marketing and your strategy, like it is on the battlefield. So here's a couple of ideas. Establish your marketing budget early, like right when you get your practice going, and then stick to it. You want to make sure you're evaluating it. Do you know exactly what your numbers are? What is your acquisition cost for a new patient? How much are you spending exactly to convert into a particular procedure? If you're doing dental implants, how much is that patient costing you right now? What is your profitability numbers? You've got to know these numbers. You've got to know your conversion rates. How often is your website visitors converting? How often is your ad that you're running on Facebook converting? Unless you know the analytics and know the numbers, you're not a marketer, and frankly, your business is not going to thrive, especially in an area that you don't have the handicap of growth. You don't have some of those other things that are helping you kind of glaze over your lack of marketing skills. So second thing is that if you're not a good natural marketer, find out quickly who in the office is and get them busy. Great example is if you're not a social media Facebook user, then find the person in your office that is. Who is it that has the proclivity to take pictures all the time? Get that person taking pictures and doing social media. It doesn't always have to be you, but you have to establish who that person is quickly. The next thing is to initiate the 24/7 marketing model as quick as you possibly can. That is the follow-up model. If you don't know what the 24/7 marketing model is, please reach out to me, Mike at drdemographics.com. I'm happy to share that with you and show you how you can plug that in to your system extremely efficiently and very, very profitably. The last thing is do the things your competition will not. I call them the big three. I'm sorry, the 3 T's. The first one is invest time. The second one is invest your talents. And your third one is to invest your things. If you invest those 3 things in your community, then you can ultimately be successful and increase that trust score with the people that are already there. The last one is to get help before you need it. Many of you that are listening to this, you may be thinking, man, this is great stuff, but I have no idea how I'm going to deploy this or understand it at a level that we can be successful. Let me invite you to reach out to me and talk to me about our Dental Marketing Mastery Program. You can find it right there on drdemographics.com. You can click under marketing and you'll find the Dental Marketing Mastery registration. We're starting a new group on August 1st. I would love to have you be part of that. If you want to be part of the elite, part of the top doctors that not only execute on marketing, but actually understand it and understand what the ramifications are of them spending money on marketing, let me invite you to find out more about that. You do that by reaching out to me at mike@drdemographics.com, or you can call me at 435-559-9016. And that is my personal cell phone, the one that I carry with me. And right now, if you text me or call me, I can give you that information and we can get you on the path of better marketing. So regardless of what happens with your neighborhood, regardless of what happens with your community, you can still be successful in spite of all that. Scott?
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I just want to say something that Mike said is really true, and that is consistency. Let's be very blunt with each other here. The reason people use us, Mike and I, isn't because we're necessarily the smartest knives or the sharpest knives in the drawer. At least some of us aren't.
Not the best looking, that's for sure.
Well, you know what I'm saying. But what they will use us for is because they need the help in consistency. They need to make sure that their marketing plan is carried off, gather the research on sites, and that they get information in their hands so they can make a choice. Worst thing in the world you can do is not to make a decision. You know, whether it's a wrong decision, of course, you don't want to do that, but you got to make a decision. And sometimes that's where we come in handy to be able to help you. I want to thank all of you for watching or listening today. If we can help you, please visit us at drdemographics.com. Don't forget our little discount for the day, which is Miracle Max 49. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks so much for watching.